I'm going to pull a trick on you. I'm not going to give the talk that was in the title that I sent earlier. So that's a terrible thing, and that causes real havoc with programs. I'm going to show pictures of my grandkids and gardening and that kind of thing. A couple comments. One, it's a real honor to be here and be with all of you. And many of you are colleagues, and some of you that I don't know personally have been very influential in my work and my thinking and so forth. So it's a real honor to be here. Our hosts, Nell Smith and her husband Lauren, are great hosts. I want to tell you, I told Nell, she thought I was kidding. I said, we're not leaving. We're staying here. She comes down with fresh squeezed orange juice in the morning, and today it was 2 muffins, and we're so well treated. We're just not going away. So we've applied for citizenship. We told them we're moving in. We had the furniture mover is going to come and move our furniture. So we're going to stay. Now, what I want to do, I'm the thing between you and lunch, and that's not a good place to be. Last night, I was the thing between a group, some of you are still here, and a cash-free bar. That's even a worse place to be. So I want to say a few things, and I want to change the tempo a little bit. If we had 100 years, we could all be really optimistic. There's so many good things going, and Costa was such a good reporter on many of those things, but you go anywhere around the world, as all of you do at some point, and you find lots of good things. The creativity is bubbling up. If you get real quiet, you can feel the movement growing on planet Earth. And you couldn't have said that there was a movement 20 years ago. There wasn't. 25 years ago, certainly not. 50 years ago, no way. But there is a movement now, and it's global, and it's growing. And the question is whether we have time enough. So I want to start with the title I thought, and I pondered this a little bit. We talk about sustainability a great deal. And the fact is, no one knows what that word means. We throw it out like confetti at a parade, but no one really knows what that word will call us to do or require us to do over the next 10, 20, 50 years, 100 years, 500 years, and so forth. But we are, in this modern world, cast a long shadow on future generations, a very long and dark shadow on future generations. That's just the fact of the matter. So how do we think about it? And in my thinking, more and more, I think it's going to be like a journey. And so I was thinking, what kind of journey could help illustrate this point a little bit. And there's the Odyssey, and there's Moses, and so forth. But there's an American writer, Larry McMurtry, that wrote a little book called, actually, the big fat book called Lonesome Dove. And Lonesome Dove is a town in Texas, and it is hot in Texas. It is dusty. This is a nowhere town. This is what they called a 2-dog town back in those days. All right, this is locked up again. There we go. So this is more or less the journey that they were on. And Lonesome Dove is down at the bottom of that line. And these guys are sitting around. This is made into a movie. Robert Duvall was the actor, probably one of the best actors of our time, and he's in the movie. And so Lonesome Dove is this nowhere little town. These guys are sitting around in West Texas, and it's hot, and it's dusty, and it's flat, and there's no feature, there's no water. It's awful. And they're talking about going to Montana. And in their mind, Montana is lush, and it's green, and it's wonderful, and there are mountains, and it's peaceful, and so forth. And they're going to go to Montana. So think of Montana as sustainability for just a moment. And so this is like crossing over 5 Tasmanias, or maybe a bit more, to get to this place. They have no idea of the rivers they got to cross, and the deserts, and the mountains they've got to get through, and the resistance they'll find from Native Americans, and so forth. But they're going to Montana. And in their mind, Montana is this wonderful place. Sustainability for us is that same kind of thing. Sustainability is this wonderful place. You got windmills and squiggly light bulbs, and we all drive Priuses and eat healthy, locally grown foods and so forth. We don't have a clue worldwide what this is going to require of us. I want to talk about that a little bit. But we're educators. In one way or another, and everybody, Costa's exactly right. We're all, in some fashion or another, are educators. And that's education, capital E, not small e. We've done it generally badly. This cartoon is one rendition, one way to describe this. We've taken the world, complex and confusing, this booming, buzzing confusion, as William James called it, and we've rendered it into disciplines. And that was necessary for maybe a couple of reasons, but that came at a high price. We took reality and we carved it up into chunks. And so if you were in economics department, you could get tenured in an economics department and do quite well, knowing things or purporting to know things that they knew were not true in physics. You didn't have to believe in the laws of thermodynamics, the most basic laws of the universe, as far as we know. You could know things that people in ethics and philosophy departments would find abhorrent, and people in psychology departments would find that's just not true. Humans aren't just only self-maximizers. But we carved the world up into this mailbox pigeonhole system. And we carved reality up into those chunks. Now, the question for environmental education is getting those chunks back together again. And it required us thinking, this is a little bit of a deviation here just for a minute, but we went deeper. We said you have to go deeper and deeper into subject matters. And somebody a long time ago said you had to know more and more about less and less until you knew everything about nothing. And that was the expert. And then, but environmental studies and environmental education is about a different way. You work laterally instead of going deeper and deeper into subjects, which is a good thing to do in some ways. But we said we were about connections. We were about connections between disciplines. So to be a good environmental thinker, you had to understand natural sciences. And you did have to understand how we got into the mess we got in. The environment's never been the problem. We're the problem. And that forced us to get into economics and into sociology and into politics. Where did we go wrong? That meant understanding a whole lot of history and a whole lot of humanities and what was our higher potential. So here are two thoughts. The disorder that we see out there in the natural world reflects a prior disorder up here. It's how we think. And that disorder is particularly important for people who purport to improve thinking. All of us as educators say that we can help improve young people's way to think and to feel about the world. So this is our core. But it doesn't begin, the environment then for all of us in this room and for everybody out there, the environment isn't just another item on a long list of items and problems. It is the fundamental thing. And education is the heart of it. This is the first and the most important thing we can do as a culture. Change how we think. So if you had your leadership here, we had my leadership here, and you put them up on the stage, you say, okay, how do you think about various kinds of things? What are the missing concepts? What did you not learn when you proposed that law or when you cut that budget? What did you not know about something? Here's another proposition. Everything that we do is environmental education. We tend to think of the big house of education. And environmental education is this little back room you tacked onto the back. That's not the way it is. All education is environmental education by what we include or what we exclude. We teach young people they're part of or they're a part from. So everything that we do. To teach, again, to pick on economists for just a moment, if you have a class in economics that says environment isn't important, you can externalize pollution and the cost of carbon and so forth. That's teaching something, and it's environmental. It's just wrong. And so everything that we do is environmental. All right, let's saddle up. You don't find that funny? I love this guy's work. He's got a bunch of horses and so forth, and they're all headed for catastrophe and so forth. And I put this in here partly because I thought it'd make you laugh, but it didn't, so I failed at that. So I'm going to have to explain something more profound. I'm going to have to think about something real quick here. It's called the human condition. And we've got this amazing capacity to screw things up. And so this isn't optimism or pessimism, is none of the kind. You just say, hey, take a hard look at reality, and reality is humans can really screw up a whole lot of things. It was once said about an American politician, he was so incompetent he could really screw up, that wasn't the word to use, but a two-car funeral. That forget the body or something. And humans have that capacity. So we start out, we saddle up, and we know that we can be a problem. And then if you want to be more formal about the same thing, Jared Diamond, a great anthropologist and scientist and social scientist, wrote this book 5 or 6 years ago. It's called Collapse. And he goes through the history of civilizations, and there's just a whole lot of them don't work out. And there are reasons why they don't work out. So as we set out for Montana on this journey, we have to pay attention. We may not get there. We've got to be shrewd. We've got to be smart. It isn't just that we feel so good about going to Montana. That's important. But it won't get us to Montana. We have to be smart about the journey, who goes with us and how we go. A couple other comments. This is going to be a tough journey. All of you have seen charts like this. This is simply climate change and temperature and carbon. Carbon dioxide is one of 6 or 7 primary heat-trapping gases. Water vapor is a heat-trapping gas. And this is the one thing that we can't, that we can miss a lot of things on this journey. We can forget to take a spare tire in the wagon. We can forget to take some bullets. We can forget to take a length of rope or whatever. But this is the one thing we've got to be aware of on this journey. The planet is changing. We have come out of the Holocene era. That's the last 10,000 or 12,000 years when humans became everything that we became. That was our art, our poetry, our history, our culture. That was everything. And that is why we're in this room. We're now in what Paul Crutzen and other people have labeled the Anthropocene. Anthro meaning human, dominated era. And so it's us. And we've now changed the planet. Bill McKibben, the great writer and climate activist in the States, in one of his recent books calls this Earth, E-A-A-R-T-H, two A's, different planet. And so this is a world that whatever we do, if we stop emitting heat-trapping gases today, all the things that come out of our tailpipes and smokestacks, all that stopped, we would still have 1,000 years ahead of rising sea levels, rising temperatures, and today in the water it would have felt good, maybe, changing ecologies and all the things that pertain thereunto that affect food and political stability and economics and all these other things. So it's like throwing a stone into a pond and you see the ripples go out. So on this journey to Montana, we got some tough things ahead of us. This is the one thing that we got to get right. We have to understand as rapidly as we possibly can and make a transition to a solar-powered world. Before we set out from Lonesome Dove, we better know, too, that this is going to be a long journey. It isn't going to be quick. So when we talk glibly about sustainability and we're going to become a sustainable school or sustainable this and that, no way. It's a lot tougher than that. We've got to become good accountants for how much fossil energy is embedded in the infrastructure around us, in our clothes, our roads, our facilities. This podium has a carbon footprint. All of us do. Elaine and I emitted a whole lot of carbon flying through 12 time zones to get here. I'm glad we did, but we better rectify that in some other way. This is a quote from David Orr. I won't read it, but the point is very simply that once you put carbon in the atmosphere, it stays there a long time. So this means in your work as educators and my work as an educator, we have to be very clear with young people to understand how this world works as a physical system. They've got to know this. It isn't just going to be enough to teach them how to, recycle and so forth. They've got to know the big numbers. They've got to know how this planet works as a physical system. Once carbon is in the atmosphere, it stays there a long time. So you think in terms of multiples of thousands of years. The half-life of carbon is very long. So this is going to be a tough journey. And there is no guarantee. Bill McKibben last week at the Omega conference got up at the end of he was talking about 350.org, one of the great climate change organizations in the world. And he said at the end of the talk, and all the speakers said basically the same thing, we don't know that we're going to get to Montana. We don't know that we're going to make it. If you're an odds maker out in Alpha Centauri, you're not going to bet much on Homo sapiens making it all the way to Montana to this condition of sustainability. So let's face the odds. This is going to be a tough journey. It's going to be a long journey. And then there's this problem, and this has been swept under the rug. And I said the other day that there are three ways we can blow our tenure, our longevity on the Earth. One is to blow the planet up, and that's nuclear war. The second is the environmental problem, and that is to wreck the planet, overheat the planet, and acidify the oceans and drive species into extinction. That's the environmental problem. There's a third way we can do this. And the third way is one we still celebrate, and I think for the large part, the culture is not aware of this. But the third way we can blow our tenure on the planet is very simply to create machines that will be smarter than we are. And when they learn how to self-replicate, they may find us inconvenient. So the rise of robots, Norbert Wiener, who's one of the great scientists and great mathematicians of the 20th century. Norbert Wiener, also one of the founders of cybernetics, wrote a little classic book called The Human Use of Human Beings in 1948. And that same year, he wrote an article that the New York Times reprinted recently, and he said, we must face the fact that every degree of independence we give the machine is a degree of possible defiance of our wishes. The genie in the bottle will not willingly go back in the bottle, nor have we any reason to expect them to be well disposed to us. So you think of your smartphone. We celebrate smartness in our gadgets and devices. So the computer I've got, the smartphone, and my briefcase, and your smartphone, and all this intellectual stuff, below the surface, there is now an emerging intelligence, and we don't think much about it, and we should. And so this is an argument against technology. We tend to dismiss all that by calling that Luddism or Luddite, mostly a word used by people who don't know the history of Ned Ludd, but that's all right. So there are 3 ways to blow our tenure on the planet, and there may be a few others, but sustainability is a big conversation. So on this journey to Montana, do we take these folks with us? And when we get to Montana, are we in the wagon being pulled by our machines, or are we pulling the machines at the behest of our masters, a machine? So the rules of this trip, they're real simple. There's a talk coming up on All I Needed to Know I Learned in Kindergarten. This is a wonderful little book that's still in print by Robert Fulgen. So the rules of the road are clear, and we've got to be very clear about how we teach this to young people. Play fair. Rules and laws are there for a point. Clean up your messes, and that means acid in the oceans, carbon in the atmosphere. That means all the toxic we willingly spew around. Share your cookies. We've got to be a sharing society. And the fact is, and you'll see this in just a moment, wealth has gone up to this level. We've got to begin to think politically and economically. And so all around the world, wealth has trickled up, and there's a very little thin strata of hyper-wealthy people. In the United States, 400 people control more net wealth than the bottom 185 million people. Don't take things that aren't yours, including the rights of future generations to life and liberty and happiness and so forth. And then finally, in dangerous times, hold hands crossing the street. Come together as communities. I love the way Costa put that, because one of the ways we come together is around food and community activities. And so that is going to be also critically important for how we make it. So let me change gears here just a little bit. Your road to Montana, this condition of sustainability, will be different than mine. So this is the very personal part of the story. And let me deviate just a wee bit here. In the late, roughly around the year 2002, 2008, a group of us got together, worked for a foundation. The foundation put together a fair amount of money, and we said we would go to the next president of the United States with a climate action plan, which would assume that climate wasn't just another item on a long list. In fact, it was the linchpin that held all those other issues together. And our time was not our friend. This is 2007, 2008. And so we met with all the people running for the White House that year, including Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama and so forth. And we gave Barack Obama, after the election, a very thick document it was a climate action plan for the first 100 days of his administration. Obviously, it didn't take, although it influenced a lot of things that were below the radar screen. So we continued to meet with him. The group met with his cabinet in January of this year. And so we continue to work on that issue, but that's up here. And that isn't going very far, not in American politics. And I gather from what I've heard about your politics, it's not going to go very far now. You've repealed your carbon tax and so forth, the very thing that we need to make this trip to Montana at that kind of level. So at the same time, I was writing a book called Down to the Wire, Confronting Climate Collapse. That book was a meditation on what it means for us to live in this era. We're the hinge point between the Holocene and this Anthropocene. And if our grandchildren and their grandchildren have any chance at all for life, a good life, it's up to us. We are the connecting generation. And so for me, I began to think about, well, what do we do where I am? And then how do we take these things to scale? Because the point is not a garden. The point is changing the entire food system. And so gardens have a reason for being there as part of a larger picture. We have to take these things to scale. Now, the question then, I teach at was teaching at a little liberal arts college called Oberlin, founded in 1832. It's the first college in the United States to accept women and African Americans and graduate them, so it's part of our DNA. It has a great conservatory music, great art program. We turn out more young people who go on for PhDs in sciences than any other liberal arts college in the United States. So what do I do there? And so this is the first part of that journey to Montana. And start with what you all know. Those little kids that we saw the other day at a primary school here when we just got off the airplane, those little kids remember the garden activities that we saw just after we got off the plane, because they were teaching others. They were down here at the bottom of this pyramid. You've all seen this pyramid. What I'm doing right now is up here at the top. Lecture method, you're not going to remember anything I'm saying here. Maybe by lunchtime you'll have forgotten it all, certainly in a week or a month or a year, whatever. That's not how we remember things. We remember what we do. And so the doing part is critically important. Teaching others is the most important part, but the actual engagement. If I was to say to you, what were the most important things in your life? What do you remember most? It would have somebody there, be it father or mother or brother, uncle, friends or whatever, but you were doing something. It is not often abstract things that help move us or that we remember. So, with that background, in 1995, excuse me, we started an effort at Oberlin to build an environmental studies center. And the administration at the time said, if you want to do this, you'll have to raise all the money for it, and we're not going to put any money into it, but you can't go to any donor otherwise ever likely to give to Oberlin College. And you know the drill. I see some people nodding. So that left me the Columbia Drug Cartel until they told me, no, they're ours too. So we were down to kids' lunch money. So what we did was say, okay, we're going to build a building, and we're going to hold public charrettes. Can we engage young people? Now remember, this is a group of young people that look at all these trend lines, and they know what the trends are. They know what the story is. They see all these lines going up like this and down like this. And so in Star Wars lingo, their attitude often is, kind of beam me out of here. Let me find another planet where things are looking a little better. So we came together, and we said, you want to be part of this effort? Come on in. So we had 13 charrettes or public planning meetings, and about 250 students came in and engaged the process. And this is really cool. The first time, and they're designing a building. From ground up. This wasn't a remodel effort. This is a greenfield building. So we're designing this building, 13 charrettes. The guy here in the back, this is John Lyle, who, if you don't know John Lyle's work, it's online. He died in 1990. This is John down here. He was the author of a wonderful little book called Regenerative Design for Sustainable Development. It's still in print. So we got together. Now remember, I'm from Ohio. I said the other day that sunshine in Ohio is kind of a theory. We understand it shines somewhere, but not there. So we have about as many cloudy days as the city of Seattle. We're a little bit sunnier than most all of Germany is by comparison. So the first thing students wanted was a building powered by sunshine. I said, do you know where you are? You're in Ohio. But no, they wanted it, building powered by sunshine. And then they wanted a building where drinking water came into the building and drinking water left the building. No waste product would leave the building. And there's several ways you can do that. You can put toilets in another building. You can ask them to be more disciplined and those kinds. So it's drinking water in, drinking water out. They wanted to eliminate all the toxics and so forth. So what they did was basically set a standard for a building that's now embodied in all the National Green Building Standards, BREEAM, and in the U.S. case, U.S. Green Building Council standards. So these were all things on the left side, and this is what they actually designed and built. 14,200 square foot, entirely solar-powered building, zero discharge building. And we eliminated toxics, it was certified wood, and so forth and so on. This was built at the platinum level, which is the highest level. In the USGBC, you go silver, gold, platinum, and it raises the issue of why green buildings are named after heavy metals, but that's a different thing. So this was a platinum building before there was a rating system. Powers, last year we generated 144% of the power the building used, and it does everything buildings otherwise do. So that was a building. This is the back. The back part of the building is a landscape, so they do all their own landscape maintenance. We run a small farm, in effect, around the building, an acre and a quarter site, so it's not big. This is the back. You see the orchard as it was about 4 years ago. Interior shot, very sunny, very daylit building, works very well. This is Bill McKibben giving an Earth Day lecture during a 6-inch rain, absolute deluge. What Bill, and I took this picture from upstairs looking down, and what Bill and the audience down on the floor could not see was Oberlin students were skinny dipping out here in the pond in a 6-inch rain. I'm sure your students don't do that, but in Oberlin they'll do that from time to time. This is the living machine. You flush the toilet, the water comes into this, and this is an indoor wetland designed by John Todd, the great biologist. And what this does effectively, it's 4 tanks, 7 feet deep, about an arm width and a half wide, with a rack on the top, and the plants go down. You're trying to maximize exposure of root surface to water column, and plants do what plants do. They take out phosphorus and nitrogen. This is the building monitoring system. And so we wired the building up with 160 data sensors. We had a class with the National Renewable energy lab with about 12 different students, 3 of whom started a company coming out of this class called Lucid Design. And Lucid Design is now one of the premier high-performance building monitoring companies in the world, probably, for my money, the best. So anyway, we had students engaged in monitoring the building and figuring all that out, and there were lots more that came out of it. The most important thing about the building, though, it wasn't the building. Buildings are just buildings. It was the effect on how those kids thought. All of a sudden, they could see possibilities. They didn't know what to do about climate change or all these big issues, but they knew they could make a building that was carbon neutral, or better yet, carbon positive. It could generate more energy than it actually would use, which we then export back out on the grid. So they had a model, and 10 of those kids, or groups, to form organizations and businesses that coming out of that. 10 businesses have been started that are prosperous or successful in every sense of the word coming out of that. Those were young people. Those were people at the age of 21, 22, 25, stepping up and doing things that were really quite extraordinary. Now, if we stop there, remember, this is about scale. And this trip to Montana, we've got to take things to scale. This is not a bike tour to Montana. We've got to have something that gets all of us there. So could we take what we learned on that little building, which was systems thinking applied to architecture and landscape, could we take that to the next scale up to the city level? So this is my little town, and I said once to an audience about 3 or 4 years ago that this picture was taken by a student that we attached to a helium-filled balloon, and his name was Bob, and we liked Bob a lot. He went up about 2,000 feet and snapped some pictures for us and said he didn't transfer from Oberlin, he just kind of drifted away. And we miss him a lot. And a woman afterwards came up and said, you know, you really shouldn't treat your students like that. She thought I was serious. So this picture was just taken by a helium-filled balloon and a camera and so forth. And so this little town started in 1832. It's a city of about 10,000. About a quarter of the residents, give or take any given year, are at or below the poverty level. We're Rust Belt, and you'll see that in a map, subsequent map. Detroit, Cleveland, Youngstown, Ohio are all close by. We're Rust Belt. But that was the heart of the U.S. economy not that long ago. So the goals of the Oberlin Project are these. Could we take this idea of sustainability, evident in a little building, 14,200 square feet, raise that up to the level of a small town? Now, the question was, could a college or university or a school become a driver towards sustainability? So it isn't just separate projects. Could we congeal those into a institution-wide commitment to then take sustainable development up to the level of the neighborhood and the surrounding community? So this was a challenge. So long story short, for reasons we don't need to get into right here, we did. And so the commitment is to redevelop the local economy. What's a sustainable local economy look like? And can we, as an anchor institution, a college or university or a public school system, can we begin to drive a different development process in a small town? And can we do that in a way that spreads wealth throughout the town? Can we change the nature of the economy? Can we become climate neutral? And so we joined the Clinton Climate Initiative. We were asked to join. 90% of our electric supply last year in a coal-fired region was carbon-free, 90%. It was not nearly as difficult, it's not been as hard as we thought it might be. We figured out how to do it, and lots of other people are as well. The third goal here was local foods. Could we grow 70% of our food locally within, say, a 10 or 15 or 20-mile radius? That radius determined by the amount of carbon it takes to move food from outside in that radius into the city. And then could we do all of this as an educational venture? So this is the way we did the Lewis Center. Could you begin to move towards sustainability, in which the whole community becomes your classroom? And so it isn't just having kids in a class and a blackboard back here or kids in a garden or whatever. It is beginning to open the doors where we are teaching an entire community. We're asking them to be part of the process. And the last goal I'll get to, and the very last thing. All right, now we've gone about sustainability. I'll pick up the pace here. We've gone about sustainability as a series of kind of one-off things. So we're predicating a development, sustainable development, we think of as a system concept. So what we have done typically is we have a sustainable ag movement, gardening movement, and we have renewable energy, and then we have green building, and we have environmental education, a series of silos. What we're saying is those have to come together. We have to figure out how to do sustainability as a systems concept, where these come together so that anything, any part, any change in one part reverberates through the whole system positively. So we call this full spectrum sustainability, for lack of a better word. We've got to begin to think in lateral terms. How do we combine this together? We divide the community into a series of groups and teams, and I'll leave that aside. And then we gave out I was just talking to Vishnu about this beforehand, but we gave out a copy of Donella Meadows' classic essay, Leverage Points. So if you Google Donella Meadows Leverage Points, this essay comes up. We passed this out to 200 or 300 people in the community. The point wasn't to be scriptural. You can quarrel with her list, but what she does in this is to take everything here at the top things we fight about. This is to slow damage, and these are policy changes. But if you want to really change the system, you come down here. So these are inversely ordered. The most important thing to do is to change consciousness. Now, you can quarrel with this. You can invert the order, but the important thing for us is to get people beginning to think of how we change this system called Oberlin. We all live in systems and organizations and cities and corporations and colleges and universities and so forth. How do you change them? How do you move these? Because there has to be a lot of remodeling of organizations on this road to Montana. This road to sustainability, we're going to have to change a whole lot about how we do business. How do we begin to do that? This is just in our town. I'll speed through this a little bit more, but in our town, there's a great art museum, number 3 ranked college art museum behind Harvard and Yale, a great science program, a great conservatory of music. And now the question is, and this came up after I gave a talk, which I thought was a really good talk. My, at that time, 6-year-old granddaughter was in the audience, and she was hugging her pet stuffed giraffe, and she had a name for it. I forgot what, Herman or George or something. And she came up afterwards, and I was pretty proud of the talk, and she said, "Granddad, I really liked your talk, but Herman here thought it was boring." So that's when Elaine and I took her out of the will. But she's right, and people like me tend to be boring. I mean, we're wonky. I was trained as a political scientist. We talk about parts per million and parts per billion and dollar flows and all this kind of stuff. It's boring. So can we make conversation, this road to Montana, can we make this an exciting trip that includes both parts of the mind? Art, music, poetry, and oh, by the way, it's solar powered. Can we begin to have a larger conversation? So the question for us in Oberlin was, can you begin to mix these things together? And the big problem was, this is the Green Arts District. This is the driver in our local economy. The big problem was that, and over here, I'll do this over here for you all too. That is a great art museum. That's a Cass Gilbert building, number 3 ranked art museum in higher education, blah, blah, blah. Performing Arts Center, great Performing Arts Center. Oberlin students do great things. This is the worst hotel ever built. And I used to say, my boss is a lawyer. The president of the college is a lawyer who I work for. And I said, when he was sitting right down here in the front row once, I said, you know, this is the worst hotel. This is a plausible excuse for limited nuclear war. He said, "David, don't talk like that ever again." So I don't say that. But it is. So anyway, we're tearing it down. The idea is to take this block, and this is not a recipe for you. This is simply for us, our journey to Montana, to sustainability. We needed a driver in the local economy. We needed something that created jobs and employment and income and was a spark plug in this transition. We've got to take this to scale. If we keep it down here at this level, we ain't getting to Montana. We are not going to get there. So for us, the idea of sustainable development in this particular case under these circumstances required us to do something dramatic to rebuild the economy. So the idea is to make this a green arts district, to have a place where you have great art already there, great performances, great music, but now we need a solar-powered hotel. So this is the work began on the hotel. It's a $35 million project. It will be the first entirely solar-powered hotel and conference center, I think, in the world. If there's another one, I don't know about it. It may also be zero discharge. We're still working on that. So this, the old hotel is gone, thank God. And this is the hole that, as it existed last week. This is what will replace it. And on this side, this is the hotel part, commercial space here. This is a conference center. This will be a 4-story atrium with a curtain wall and so forth. Entirely solar powered. It will come in at the U.S. Green Building Council platinum level with the new guidelines, and this will be unique. Across the street is a building done by these 3 guys. These are students. They're in their early 20s when that picture was taken. This is a New York Times story about them. This is what they built. They had no money. They figured out how to raise $17 million so our students can do amazing things early. They don't have to wait till they're old like I am. They can begin to rethink their lives. And so we tend to think a student comes out and, you get out, school, you graduate, and you go to graduate school, and you get a PhD, and then you get a job, and then you're an assistant professor, and you can't do much because you don't have tenure yet, so you get to be an associate professor, and you can't do much because you still have needs and so forth. You finally get to be a full professor. That's when you can be active. The same kind of pattern works in companies and so forth. So the issue for us is, can we begin to accelerate the flow of leadership early in life? So our students begin to do amazing kind of creative things. These three kids did amazing work. They've now got a development company in Cleveland. They're opening 2 other big developments. But this is one of our houses, a high-performance house built by an Oberlin alum, entirely solar powered. This is the groundbreaking last Monday of a second high-performance house that will be done at the affordable scale. So this is the woman here. This is a mother and her 2 daughters. This one's really cute. She was very active. This is the official groundbreaking. Next spring, we break ground on 50 units. This is all designed to be powered entirely by sunshine and affordable. We're part of the Clinton Climate Initiative. That is one 100 kW array. This is a 3.2 megawatt output solar system. By comparison, our base load 24/7 power is 11 megawatts. Take it to scale. Got to get to Montana. We've got to have this at scale. Colleges and universities can be drivers. This is what we've done. Everything in black is finished. Everything in red is underway. So we've got, we're about $106, give or take, $1 million into the process. Most of that is investment capital. Now, this has forced us, and forced me in particular, to begin to think about, you want to take it to scale. You want to get to Montana. You want to get to sustainability. How do you pay for it? That's a whole different economy. That is an economy that works on principles that we haven't begun to reckon with yet. If we're coming out of we know what the extractive economy is about. That's digging up coal and oil and just 3 cubic miles of primeval goo, 3 cubic miles that we burn every year. And going to a world that's powered by sunshine. Enough sunshine falls on the earth every day to rival the total volume of fossil fuel reserves. So this is what we've done. I'll skip over this. This is kind of the implications. This is one way to say this. If you took a beam of light and refracted it through a crystal, it would break into a whole variety of bandwidths and so forth. And so it depends on your perspective and the bandwidth. What did we do in this Oberlin project? What's underway? And so there are a lot of different things. Students will see a more exciting downtown. Businesses will prosper more. It's a model of carbon neutrality all the way down to national security and resilience and so forth. But if we stop here, we will have done nothing very important. Can we begin as educational institutions to take this up yet to another level? So at scale, begin to think about city regions. This is our region. Flint, Michigan up here, the tax base in Flint, Michigan, where we used to make cars, falls 20% per year. If you want to get to Montana, we got to go through some pretty tough places. They aren't going to get there unless we reinvent an economy there that works for them. Detroit, you've heard about. Toledo, Ohio, all the way over to Youngstown, Ohio, close to where Elaine and I grew up a million years ago. So this is the Lake Erie Crescent. This is the western shore of Lake Erie. It is the southernmost of the Great Lakes, relatively shallow compared to Lake Michigan and Lake Huron and so forth. But the theory here is this. Can we, in education, begin to drive a very different process? And also, again, use our students in the process. So all the way through, we got student teams working on a variety of research things and various kind of efforts. And in the meantime, beginning to rub shoulders with some of the great thinkers of the time, Janine Benyus in biomimicry and Bob Berkebile in architecture and so forth. They're getting role models of people who do courageous and really amazingly creative things at scale. We want to get to Montana. We want to get to sustainability. We're going to have to do this in a way that begins to create a whole new generation of leaders and thinkers. So the idea is very simply is this. If we make it or process it or grow it or service it within that region, that Lake Erie Crescent region, we buy it. So instead of importing food and so forth from Tasmania or China, we'll grow it there. It means you don't have to move heavy things long distances. So if you want to solarize, you begin to create industries and businesses that create solar collectors and inverters and electronics and so forth. It's called import substitution, and there's not a new idea in that. That's been around a long time. Jane Jacobs, the third bullet here. the wonderful urban theorist, Jane Jacobs, wrote a classic book about American cities called The Death and Life of Great American Cities. And in that book, she described how cities fail and then how they could be resuscitated. In a later book, she began to describe the economies of city regions. Can we in higher education, can we begin to think about what are the ideas, what do we know that could work at that scale? Because if all we know is down here at that scale, we're not getting to Montana, we'll never get to sustainability. Remember, time is short. We've got a window of maybe 10 years, maybe 20 years, but we've got to deflect a lot of those trend lines. So what we've done, very quickly, is to take a group of universities and colleges. And the goal is to get the presidents of those institutions to give us their CFOs, their chief financial officers, the people who make decisions about how you spend and how you invest. And the goal is to move $1 billion per year from this side of the ledger over here to this side of the ledger in 3 areas. So remember, we've gone from a building to a small city up here now to the city region. Can we move $1 billion from energy bills in fossil fuels over to renewable energy and efficiency? Can we move part of that billion in food systems? $300 or $400 million already being spent for food, most from California and overseas. Can we get that reorganized to buy locally and move that part of that money over to this side of the ledger? And then finally, urban infrastructure. We build a lot of buildings. Any given year in this region, there will be $1 billion or more of new construction and renovation underway. Can we move that into the green building column? So the question is, can we in higher education and schools and the educational sector generally move a lot of money from this side of the ledger to that side of the ledger? Here's the beauty of it. The strategy of change asks no one to do anything we don't otherwise do. We spend money in higher education on food and on energy and on infrastructure. We already do that. It's asking for no new money. I don't need help from the federal government at a time when they won't give it anyway. We don't need it. So secondly, you're taking waves that are already in motion. So the local food movement is booming. Costa gave a good snapshot of what's happening here. It's booming in the States as well. It's booming in Europe. People want to eat locally. It's fresher, and they know the farmers, and so farmers' markets are growing. The wave called solar energy. The cost of solar energy has dropped dramatically. In the States, it is now roughly within hailing distance of base load coal, no carbon emissions. And in urban infrastructure and redevelopment, young people that I teach and you know, don't want to live out on 5 acres in the suburbs. They want to be in town, close to coffee shops and jobs and urban excitement. The investment strategy is this. For CFOs, we want them to meet, the chief financial officers, to meet with an investment advisory group. And you ask them very simply to do 3 things. One is extend the horizon, what's called the payback time. So if it takes a little bit more to build a building that's green and doesn't use a lot of fossil energy, that's fine. If the payback time is, let's say, out 10 years, that's still 7% return on investment. That's pretty good. And then begin to do investment as part of a group of companies and so forth that begin to invest together and begin to collaborate. And then finally, locate those places where 2 plus 2 isn't 4, it's 22. Those places where you get high level of synergy and interaction. Baseball teams. Our second big group is sports teams. There are 7 big league sports teams in this region. But imagine that scoreboard out there flashing information about carbon emissions. Imagine the food. In America, we have hot dogs. You all have had hot dogs. Imagine hot dogs made out of local roadkill. Imagine beginning to use the buying power of sports teams to solarize, change food systems, change the way they build and the way they operate. And imagine that scoreboard out there beginning to flash information. So education goes beyond classrooms, beyond kids K through 22. It begins to go into the wider public. This is Detroit, everything in red. And Detroit's a city of 140 square miles. You could take Boston, Manhattan in New York, San Francisco, drop them into 140 square miles and have room left over for 10 Oberlins. Everything in red has been basically abandoned or torn down, or that's derelict property. Imagine rebuilding that. Imagine city farms beginning to grow up in Detroit, where once you had neighborhoods and old factories. Now, finally, a couple of final thoughts. Can we then take city regions? In our case, the Lake Erie region right here. So this is Lake Erie Crescent. Can we take this and can you then begin to develop other regions? Imagine a regional strategy, transition towns, up to transition regions. Imagine this in China, in India, in Australia, and all over the world. And waiting for governments to act, they've been really slow to get it. We're here partly because of massive political failure at the highest level of government. Not just here, but in the United States. And we've seen that chapter and verse, and it won't change anytime soon. So imagine this bottom-up movement. Imagine education leading that bottom-up movement. Our schools and colleges and universities being shift buying power. We already do it. No new strategy here. Engaging our students instead of hand-wringing and in operating down here, which they need to do, by the way. But imagine making our kids strategists for this new era. They know how to garden, they know why they should garden, they know why local foods are important, and they also understand something about investment in money. So essentially what we're saying is higher education can begin the process of secession from big oil and from Monsanto and big pharma companies. We can begin that process. Life in Montana, when you get there, it'll be a while to get there. It's not sure that we ever will. But when you get there, that is a life worth fighting for. There's still a good world to fight for. So when you look at the carbon data and climate change numbers, and you should look at those, you've got to be students of this, there's a world worth fighting for. And this is that world, it'll be the Anthropocene. It will not be a repeat of the world I grew up in a long time ago. And then finally, a couple last thoughts. People say, well, it's a good idea, but you just can't pay for it. We pay for sustainability. We pay for sustainability, whether we get it or not. We pay in a different currency. Our choice. This is economics of sustainability 101. Our choice is whether we pay now or pay a whole lot more in the future. But we pay in terms of war and disease and unrest and difficulty and lost human potential. Second thought here. In getting to Montana, we have to learn to think in terms of systems. We have to optimize, not component parts. That's what we did in the industrial era. We made great cars, but they operated in a system that destroyed the planet. We made great housing, but operated in a system that destroyed the planet and destroyed human possibilities. So beginning to optimize the system means that you take care of all the parts. Everybody gets to Montana. Everybody gets there. They're part of the system. Future generations are part of that system. Other species are part of the system. And beginning to think in systems, that is, you people are radicals. You people are dangerous people. Once you introduce the idea of systems to people, you've got to think in systems. You've got to act as if you were in a system. We don't always get it right. But that is the most dangerous idea you could imagine to the extractive world. They want us and they want your students in pigeonholes. We're not going to leave them there. And then finally, there's this. You've all heard the adage, you want to find out why something happens, follow the money, the old lawyer's adage. Understand, our kids need to know the rules of the game. They need to know the rules of the system by which we operate. We didn't get into this mess planet-wide by mistake. The rules said we were going to get there. Once you said we're going to grow the economy without limit, once we said that growth and consumption were the highest goals of the society, once we said that security with military weapons, that was the number one goal, then everything kind of followed in place. A society that took those as its ultimate goals was going to change climate. It was going to destroy the ozone layer. It would have conflict. These aren't accidents. They're not anomalies. They're the logical working out of the system. A couple last thoughts. You've all seen it. When we get to Montana, we really don't want to arrive with wagon loads and carloads or truckloads of idiots. We've got to rethink our technology. We've got to rethink how this works for us and what it does to us. We cannot be simply willing idiots in this process. When we get to Montana, I hope we keep the sense of wonder. There's a beautiful world. We've seen a part of the world I've never seen before in Tasmania. The little bit that we've seen of it is absolutely incredible. I hope we keep a world worth wondering over, but a world of wonder. And then finally, my last thought is simply this. Martin Luther King, the year before he died or was killed in the States, wrote one of the great comments in the state papers. Time in this transition to Montana is not our friend. Time is really short. We have to do our work, your work, mine, everybody, with a sense of incredible urgency. We are within a few years, the scientific data could not be more clear. We're within a few years of transgressing a line from which there is no return. Think of this going down a highway, and there are off-ramps on this highway. We've been passing off-ramps to better destinations than what is in prospect for us. But dead ahead is the ultimate disaster. There's still off-ramps. Martin Luther King put it this way: there's such a thing as being too late. Procrastination is the thief of time. Life often leaves us standing bare, naked, and dejected with a lost opportunity. The tide and affairs of man doesn't remain at the flood, it ebbs. We may cry out desperately for time to pause in her passage, but time is deaf to every plea. It rushes on. Over the bleached bones and jumbled residue of numerous civilizations are written the pathetic words, too late. I want to thank you for not being too late, for everything that you do, for everything that you're going to do. We're going to make it to Montana. We're going to get there, and you're going to be in the forefront. Thank you all.